Welcome to Google Forms Masterclass. Today I will take you through Google Forms step by step. No fluff, no technical jargon. By the end of this video, you will learn all there is to know about Google Forms even if you are a rank beginner. This video will be extremely useful to you if you are a course creator, an educator, an entrepreneur, or anyone who needs to collect information from people. So let us jump right in to this comprehensive Google Forms Masterclass. By the way, I'm Ram Gopal from presentationprocess.com. We help professionals like you create engaging presentations. I love Google Forms because it is a simple, free tool that allows you to gather data and information from people. And what makes this tool even more powerful is that data can be linked to a spreadsheet, which allows you to analyze that data and get some insights. To give you a quick snapshot, you create a form using Google Forms. You send the link to people, they fill the form, the responses are automatically stored and organized, which can be connected to a spreadsheet, from which you can do further analysis and get some deep insights. In fact, a lot of the information you need is already organized as simple to understand visual charts by Google. So all you need to do is to look at those charts, get your insights, and take action. First, let us learn where to access Google Forms. For that, all you need to do is to go to Google browser and search for forms.new and hit enter, and you will be taken to Google Forms. It is that simple. Once you are inside, you will get to this main area where you can write your questions. Second, this is the place where you see the responses that are automatically collected and stored from your respondents. And third is the settings tab where you set the settings for your questions and responses. We will go through all of these step by step. Since the best way to learn any program is to play with the program, we will try to understand Google Forms with a simple and practical case study. Let us assume that we are a small organization who wants to give training to all our employees on the different Google apps. So we want to do two things. First, we want to send out a survey to all the employees to know how familiar they are with the various Google apps and how often do they use the different Google apps. We also would like to know if there is a training session to be conducted, what date and time would suit them. Once done, we also would like to create a small 5-question quiz to understand objectively how much do they know about the different Google apps. So those are the two things that we want to do. So let us see how to do it from scratch. And here we are starting with a plain, simple Google form. To give this a name, I'm going to click on the name that is given here, press Ctrl A to select the text and start typing. I'm going to call this Google Apps Training New. So this is going to be the name, and for description, a survey to understand the level of familiarity of different Google apps. And of course, I'm going to change this properly. And now we have given a description. Now, if you go to the top left corner, you notice that the name for this form is still remaining as untitled form. It has not picked up the name from here. When you click, instantly you can see that the name has been picked up. You can leave it like that, or if you want to give it a different name, it is completely up to you. You can do that. Now, right next to the name, you see two things. One is a folder and the other one is a star icon. You can move this form to any folder of your choice by clicking on this. And if you want to favorite this particular form, you can click on star. So you can instantly access it whenever you want. And you can see that it clearly says that all changes are saved in Drive. So it's very easy for you to access it. The next thing I want to do is to give this form a better look and feel. So let me go to this option here called Customize Theme. And that allows me to change the various fonts, the header image, and I can choose the color for the background. So let me do that. First, I'm going to choose for header a different font. Maybe this time I'm going to choose Oswald, and you can see that now it looks very beautiful. And for questions, I want the questions to stand out from the choices. So I'm going to choose a different font, Merriweather, and I want to increase the font size for the questions so the questions can clearly stand out from the various options. So let me go here and increase the font size to 14. And I'm going to leave the font type and size for the options. Then I want to change the header image and then the color of the background. Now, there is a very interesting thing to be observed here. I can make a change to the background by clicking on this. You can see that the background color has changed. But then the problem is when you choose a header image, Google automatically changes the background color based on the image that you chose. So it is always a good idea to choose these things in the order in which they are given. So let me go to choose image and I have the option to choose based on the various themes. I'm going to choose the one from illustrations, something that looks interesting, maybe something that represents a survey, study, things like that, because we are going to conduct a training program. So I'm going to select this and say insert. Now you can see that the image is now on the header, and based on the image color, you can see that the background is already changed. I can leave it the way it is, or I can always change the color. I'm going to leave it the way it is because it really looks pleasant. Now the next thing I want to show you, even before we start writing even our first question, is it is always a good idea to save some effort and time by using templates that are already built inside Google. For that, all you need to do is to go to this Forms icon. When you click on it, you go to the Forms home page where you can see a template gallery here. If you want to expand the template gallery, you can click on the option here and you can see that all the templates are organized in 3 sections. One is personal, second is work, and the third is education. The good thing about these templates is most of the commonly used forms are already created here for you. All you need to do is to just change the sample text and create your own form. It saves you a lot of time. For that, the main thing you require is a flexibility in the way you look at the templates. You need to understand the underlying concept of the templates instead of actually looking for the specific template that you want. Let me explain. Let us say I want to create a form to book the different conference rooms that I have in my company. Now, if you see, there are no such options available readily. But then when I go through the various options, I can see that there is something called as time of request. When I click on it, I can open the template. It says, please submit the times you need to take off work and the type of leave you are taking. Now, I can always see this as, please submit the times you need to book your conference room and the type of meeting you want to have. Can you see? The moment I understand the underlying purpose of this template, I can customize it to my requirement. When I go here, I can say name and I can write my name here. Instead of leave dates, I can say the date of conference room booking. And here is the time of the day which I want to book it. And the type of leave could be the type of meeting that I want to attend. And here I have various options available. So I can have different types of meetings given here as my choices. And then reason for leave can be replaced by reason for booking the conference room. So what I recommend is for you to go through the various templates that are already available, understand where they can be used in your organization for your type of work, and save some time for yourself. Anyway, let us get back to the survey form we were trying to create. Now, if you remember, the first thing we want to know is how familiar are our employees with the commonly used Google apps. To know that information, we need to write our question. Now, coming to writing our question, we have a lot of options here. When I click on this drop-down menu, I see the various question types. Let me quickly give you the various options available here, and let us try and create the different question types so we have a practical understanding of the various question types. The first thing we have is short answer and the second one is paragraph. These two are very similar. The difference is only in the length. First, I want to gather some basic information about the employees. So I'm going to go to the short answer option, and the first information I want to know is the employee ID. You can see that we have a space here for them to write their employee ID. Now, the next thing I want to know is their designation. Now, I want to add another question. I can do that by going to this option here called Add Question. By the way, this is a floating toolbar. You will see that this toolbar floats even if you scroll down, and therefore these tools are available to you at any point of time. Now I can click on this to add a question, and you can see that since I had already asked the previous question as a short answer, Google assumes that I want to add another short answer, and therefore it gives me the option automatically. I'm going to say designation. Now that is perfect. Even though the option given here is multiple choice, you can see that we have a short answer text space available, so they can write their designation here. Now there is another way to add your questions, and that is if you want to copy this existing format to the next question, you can always use this option here called duplicate question, and then you can replace the text that is already given with the new text. That saves you some time, especially when you want to create quizzes. So now we have used the first question type, which is short answer. If you want long answer, you can choose the next one called paragraph. All it does is it gives more space for them to write their text. There is no other difference. Next, we want to do something slightly more complex. Since we want to understand the level of familiarity our employees have with the various Google apps, I want to create some kind of a grid that helps me understand the level of familiarity. Let me insert a new question by clicking on Add Question option. I'm going to choose a question type called Multiple Choice Grid. We have explored these two, if you remember. Now we are going to explore these set of options. In that, we are going to choose Multiple Choice Grid. There is a reason why I'm choosing this. You will understand this as I click on this option. Now, see what is given here. First, I need to write the question, which helps them understand what this question is about. So I'm going to say, how familiar are you with the following Google apps? And question. So that is the question. And what are the options I have here? First, we have rows and then we have columns. For rows, I'm going to say forms. I can hit enter and that takes me to the next row. This time I'm going to say slides, next sheets, and next docs. So these are the 4 app types that we are going to talk about. And then for columns, I'm going to say 3 columns. The first one is going to be not aware, and the next one is familiar, and the third one is expert level. I'm just making this up so you get an idea of where to use these different question types. So we are using multiple choice grid. Now we want to know how these questions will look in the form that the respondents would get. For that, I can go to the option here called preview. If you remember, we had already gone to customize theme and we customized the look and feel of our form. So we are going to the next tool here called preview, and that gives me a quick view of how the respondents would see this form. Now, right away, I see that there is a warning which is given here called this form isn't accepting any responses. Now, please understand, till the time you publish this form, nobody would be able to fill this form, and that is something for you to remember. And it clearly says here that it is not published. And if you want to manage the published settings, you can click on this. We will not go there. First, let us see how our form looks. So here we have employee ID. People can write their answer and designation and see the multiple choice grid we have. So these are the different apps and we have the different levels of familiarity. Now, when people click on these various options, we know how much they are aware of these different types of apps. Now, I want you to observe one thing very closely. The options here are radio buttons, which means that you can only choose one option from a row. It is not possible for someone to be not aware of and yet be familiar with a certain app. And that is the reason why I chose this option. Now, what would you do if you want to allow people to choose multiple options in a given row? Then you choose a different question type. I'll come to that just in a bit. So we can now see that we have these questions shown in the preview form. There is an option here called clear form and submit. Now, if a survey only has these questions, we can publish this survey and people will have the option to submit the form after filling in their responses. If at any point of time they want to clear the form, to clear the responses so they can fill in new responses, they can hit on the clear form option. Now, we have got our preview. Let us close this and answer the question that I was talking to you about, which is, what will you do if you need to allow multiple choices on a given row? You go to this option here called Checkbox Grid. I can always change this question to Checkbox Grid and let us see what happens. I click on Checkbox Grid and let us see the preview. And when I go down here, I can see that I can check on this and this. So I can choose multiple options in a single given row. So those are the different question types. Let me close this back again. Now, so far we have learned these two question types and these two question types. Now let us get familiar with these question types next. So I'm going to add a new question by clicking on this option here. You can see when I scroll up, you can see that the floating toolbar scrolls up along with me. Now let us click on add question. The question is, which of the following apps do you use the most? And I have by default multiple choice given. Now I can write my options. The 4 options are docs, sheets, slides, and forms. Now you can see that there are square boxes given here, which means that these are checkboxes. Since we had already chosen checkboxes here in the previous question, Google automatically assumes that we want to create these checkboxes. Whenever you have checkboxes, you understand that it is possible for you to choose multiple options. For example, let me go to preview. You can see that I have these various options. I can click on docs, slides, etc. But then the question needs to be different. The question needs to be, which of the following apps do you use regularly? In such a situation, people can choose multiple options. But in our case, the question is, which of the following apps do you use the most? That means there can only be one option. Therefore, the question type that is selected right now by default is wrong. We want to switch from the checkboxes to multiple choice. So let me close the preview and let us change the question type. I can click on the option here. Instead of the checkboxes, I can click on multiple choice. Now you can see that still it is showing as checkboxes. So naturally we need to choose some other option and then come back to multiple choice. So now you can see that these are converted as radio buttons. And whenever you have radio buttons, you can only choose one of the various choices that are available. Perfect. Now, what if you don't want to have so much space given here? You can provide an option called Dropdown. I can click on this. I can change the same thing as Dropdown. And let us see what happens in the preview when I have Dropdown. When I go here, this is how my question appears. I click on the options available. I choose one of the options and that is done. You usually use Dropdown option when you want to keep your form neat without occupying much space. Let me close this. At this point, I want you to be familiar with 2 other options. The first option is the delete question option. If at any point of time you want to delete a question that you had created, you can click on this button. I had already mentioned about this one, where if you want to duplicate a certain question and replace the text, you can use this duplicate question option. Then we have this other button here called required. This is a very useful option. It is completely up to you to decide if a certain question is to be made compulsory or optional. If you toggle this off, it is an optional question. People have a choice to skip the question. But if you turn this on by clicking here, your audience will have no other option than to answer the question because it becomes a required question. Now, for each of the questions, there is another option available, which is to add a description. Let us say I have this question. I want to give some additional information so the respondents can choose the right option. So I can click on this box here. Please remember that Google treats each question as a separate block. Now, if I want to add a description, I can go down here and click on more options and can check this option called description. Now I have this new space available for me to write my description. For example, when I say what is not aware, so never used the app equals not aware. The same way, use sometimes equals familiar, use regularly equals expert. Now I can click outside. Now we have an explanation for the question. Now, if I want to format what I had written just now, I can use these various options. I can make them bold, italics, underline. And this one is if I want to insert a link in the description, I can do so by clicking on this. I can arrange the information as bullet points, either it is numbered or just as bullet points. And if I want to remove any of the formatting, I can click on remove formatting option. So whatever I had written in the description can be formatted using these various options here. Now I want to click outside and the description is written here. These are some of the small things that I want you to remember. If at any point of time you feel that your respondents would need some additional explanation for answering the question correctly, choose the right options available so you can provide the right kind of information. Now we have enough information about our employees, about their level of familiarity with the different apps. The next thing I want to see is what time and date would suit them to attend a training session. This will be an online training session. So I'm going to provide that option. Now, if you see, those set of questions are completely different from the set of questions that we had been asking so far. So I want to treat those questions separately using a separate section. Now, how do I add a section? Let me first click on the last question. Then I click on this option here called Add Section. You can see that it says section 2 of 2. Here I want to give this a title and description. The title would be Scheduling the Training Session. If you want to add description, you can do. If you don't want to, you can leave it. So it says optional. Now I want to add the next question by clicking on this option here called Add Question. The question is, which date would suit you to attend the training session? And the question that I want to choose, the question type I want to choose is date. Now, as soon as I did that, you can see that there is a new widget added. This is a calendar widget. So the respondents can choose the specific date by going to the calendar. Now, while we are at it, let us add the next question by duplicating the question. And this time the question that I'm going to ask is, what time would suit you the best? Of course, you can choose the right kind of verbiage. I'm trying to make it as simple, as easy as possible. I'm not really focusing on using the right kind of words. It's a different topic in itself. I'm going to click on the option here, the question types, and I'm going to choose the next one called time. And you can see that there is a new widget that is added. This time it is a clock widget. Now, so far in our quiz, we have used different question types. We have seen questions of short answer, different multiple choice types. We have also seen multiple choice grid options. Of course, the other one is pretty similar, which is checkbox grid. And we have also seen questions where widgets are used, which is date and time. Now, let us add another question type, which is linear scale. Linear scale and rating are very similar. I'll show you how this particular question is framed and how the options need to be. Let us add a new question and then we will insert a linear scale. So let us go to linear scale option. And here my question is, how likely are you to attend the training session? Now, we are a very polite organization, and that is the reason why we keep asking these kind of very polite questions. And let us see the options here. By default, we have 1 to 5. What is 1? 1 is not likely and 5 is very likely. Now, if I want to change the scale from 1 to 5 to 1 to 10, I can do so by clicking on the drop-down menu and choosing the option here. But I think for this purpose, 1 to 5 is good enough. Now, I want to see how these questions look in the preview. So let me hit the preview button. Now, I want you to observe one thing very carefully. If I go down in this questionnaire, you can see that my questions stop at this point, which is, which of the following apps do you use the most? We have not got the next section shown. If I hit next option here, you can see that the next section doesn't even appear. There is a reason for it. And that is, we have this star here, which is the culprit. What is the star for? Star represents required answer. You can see the explanation here. It says this is a required question, which means unless and otherwise I provide a response to this question, further questions will not even be shown. So I'm not able to see the preview of the remaining questions as well. Naturally, I need to change this to an optional question if I want to see the preview of the remaining questions. Let me go back and do that. Let me go to the question here, this one, and let me click on this block, question block, and say this is not a required option. Now, if I see the preview, I can see the first section questions here, and my next section will be appearing here when I click on next, and these are my next section questions. So as you can see, these are some small little irritants that can really bug you if you don't know what you're doing. So it is important for you to play with the tools and then understand how the various tools and buttons work. That is the reason why I'm taking so much time to take you through every single step so you can understand this program the right way. Let us close the preview. Next, I want to show you a very interesting option. The option is for you to go to a specific section based on your response to a certain question. Let me show you what I mean. Let us say I am sending this form out to everybody in the organization, and there are certain people who don't use computers that much. For example, that could be janitors, security guards, etc. So I want to eliminate those people right up front. So I want to add a new section with a specific question. Let me click on Add Section. Now you can see that my new section is inserted between the first and the third section, and that is because accidentally I was having my cursor in the first section, and therefore when I added a new section, it got inserted between the first and the third one. So if I want to move this section, all I need to do is to click on this option here which is a 3-dot menu. When I click on this, I can say move section, and you can see that this is an untitled section. I can click on this and I can click on move section up. Now this becomes my first section. The second one is Google Apps Training New, and the third one is scheduling. So I'm going to say save. So this is my first section. So what I'm going to say is eligibility. As I mentioned, I'm not really going too much for the verbiage here. The description is this survey relevant for you? And I'm going to add a new question for this one. So let me go to add question, and the question is, do you use computers as part of your work? And what is the option here? I'm going to choose multiple choice. The first one is yes, and naturally the next one is no. So when I click on it, immediately Google knows that the option is going to be no, so it is already populated. So there's some work that is saved there. And this is going to be a required question, because if the person doesn't even use computers, then there is no point in having a training program on Google Apps. Now, when I hit preview, take a look at this. Since this is a required question, this is all that gets shown. Unless and otherwise somebody answers this, they cannot move forward. Great. Let us close this. Now, I want to structure this questionnaire in such a way that if the answer to this question is yes, then the rest of the survey will be shown. If the answer is no, then they can just submit the form and move on. So how do I do that? It's very simple. When I click on this drop-down menu here, I get this option here called Go to Section Based on Answer. I can click on that and I get these options now. When the answer is yes, I can click on it. The person can go to section 2, which is about the familiarity of the Google Apps. And if the answer is no, then the person go to submit form and job done. Now, the movement from section 2 to section 3 happens automatically. You can see that it says continue to next section. So it is already given here. You also have an option to see if there is any other condition that you want to give. That is, after finishing section 2, if the person needs to go to some other section, you can make your choice here. Or if you want to have it in such a way that the person needs to submit this form based on another branching criteria, that you can do as well. So those are the various options available here in the after section option as well. Now we have built our first form. It is time to publish this form. So let me go to this publish option. Who are going to be the responders? Anyone with the link will be the responders. Where do I get the link? I get the link from this option called copy responder link. Now, when I click on this, I will not get the link right now because the survey is not published yet. So when I click on this, you can see that the form is unpublished and therefore I need to first publish it. So let me click on publish. Now, instead of having the option where anyone with the link would be able to fill the form, I want to manage who actually fills in the form. So I can click on this manage button and that opens up this dialog box. Here I can add email IDs. So let me add the email ID of another person. Of course, you can add as many people as you want. Now, the new person that I added here can be a responder or an editor. What is the difference? An editor has access to the editor view of your survey form. That means that person can add or delete questions from the survey, whereas a responder doesn't have that access. That person can only answer the questions that have been asked. In this case, I want this new person to be just a responder, so I'm going to leave it the way it is. And here it says publish the form to accept responses. I'm going to say share. Now what that does is it sends out a mail to the new person asking the person to respond to the survey that I just sent. And the way the notification will be is like this. It says notify these responders. So whoever whom you have added here will all be visible here. Form will be included in the email notification and the message can be customized. I can say this is a test survey by Ram Gopal and I can say publish and notify, and as soon as I do that, a mail is sent to Aarti Ram Gopal. Now, if at any point of time, if I want to share the survey with others, that is if I want to add some more email IDs, I can do so by going to this option here called share. When I click on that, I get this drop down menu. I can add my email IDs here just the way that I did the previous time and I can say done. Now, there are a couple of other options from this dialog box, and that is when I go to settings, I see these two options. One is allow editors to change file permissions and share. If you want to allow that, that is by default. you can leave it the way it is. If you don't want them to change the file permissions, then you can uncheck this. The second one is viewers and commenters can see the option to download, print and copy. That is given by default. If you don't want them to download or print or copy your survey form, then you can uncheck this. So please be aware of these setting options and take your decisions accordingly. I'm going to say done. Now from this point onwards, the survey form is open. I can start receiving the responses for my survey. Now, if I want to stop accepting responses, I have an option here. When I click on this option called filter option, when I click on this, I get this dialog box. It says accepting responses. Right now it is turned on or toggled on. When I say toggled off, this form will no longer be active. I no longer will be accepting responses for this survey form. And when people try to answer the survey form, they get this particular response, which is this form is no longer accepting responses. If you want to customize this message, you can always click on edit and you can write whatever that you want. This sentence is just good enough, so I'm going to leave it the way it is. First, let me turn on and say save. Now, after publishing your form, after a few days, you change your mind and you want this to be unpublished, you can do so. You can click on the three-dot menu here and you can click on the unpublished form, and this form will be unpublished. So that is an option that is available here. And as we are talking, it looks like we have already got a response, and you can see the number of responses received. It is 1. So since I only sent it to Aarti, naturally I only got 1 response. Let me click on the responses so we can see the kind of responses we have got. You can see that we have summary, question and individual options available here. Let us go through the responses here. Do you use computers as part of your work? The one response, and that is yes. And as soon as I hovered my mouse here, you can see that the response is shown here and the various answers are given here. Employee ID is written and then the designation is written and we have the answers to the various questions. So everything is very beautifully answered. So we have got our response as a chart as well. So it is easy for us to visualize the information and we can take the necessary action. Now, I want to add one more response. So you can actually see what happens when you have multiple responses to your survey. So let me log into the other account, fill that response form, and then come back here and see how this looks. Now I've opened the mail. This is how the mail would look. You can see that I have invited Aarti to respond to the following form. And you can see that this is the link to the form. And this is the snapshot of the item below. So this is what is shown here. I can say fill out in Google Forms, or I can click on this to go to the Google form. Let me say fill out in Google Forms. And now I'm going to fill this one. The first one is, do you use computers as part of your work? I say yes and say next, and that shows me the rest of the form. And I can say my ID is 252 and my designation is CEO or whatever that you want to call it. And how familiar are you with the following Google apps? I'm just going to check whatever that comes to my mind. And which of the following apps do you use the most? Maybe I use Forms the most. I'm just going to assume. And what is the next question? Which date would suit you to attend the training session? I can click on this and maybe I can say this date. And what is the time? So AM would be good. And the time can be say around 10 AM would be a good one. And how likely I'm going to be definitely attending this session. And I say submit. When I click on submit, you see that there is an option here for me to submit another response. I'll show you how to restrict the response to just one from a certain email ID a little later. We will do that in the settings section. For now, I have an option to submit another response. So I'm going to have another response for this one. Let us say I don't, and I say no and say next. And I only have an option to submit this because I don't use computers, because maybe I am the security guard. Now I can submit another response. Now I'm going to close these two forms and come back to our survey. Now you can see that I have 4 responses for this survey. When I click on responses, now see how the responses show. This is the summary. Do you use computers as part of your work? You can see that of the 4, one person said no and the remaining one have said yes, and that is what is shown as a pie chart, which is a beautiful simple visualization. And I've got the employee IDs of all the people and the designations of all the people here. And how familiar are you with the following Google apps? And all the responses are shown here beautifully with the chart. And which of the following apps do you use the most? It looks like Sheets is used the most, and the training session, whichever are the preferences are shown here. This is how likely are you to attend, and this is my chart. Now, if I go to the question-wise responses, the first question is, how familiar are you with the following Google apps? And you can see that this is how the question looks. And the responses are shown here. The first one is not aware, and 2 people responded as familiar, and 1 person has left the question blank because that person doesn't even use computer. If I go to the next question, you can see that this is my next question. Which of the following apps do you use the most? 2 people have said Sheets, 1 person said Forms, and so on. So that is how you see the responses question-wise. I also have the option to see the responses individually as well. Now, if I go here, you can see 1 of 4. This is the way the person has filled in the form. The second person has filled in the form like this. The third one has filled in the form like this. You can see that the person has said no, and there is no other information here. And the fourth one, and so on. So as you can see, the responses can be seen as a summary or question-wise or as individual-wise. This gives you sufficient control to understand the information and get the insights you require. Now, instead of seeing the information all like this, I can see the information in one place by going to this option here called Link to Sheets. When I click on Link to Sheets option, this is the dialog box that I get. I can create a new spreadsheet where all the information will be written. Or if I have an existing spreadsheet where I want to have this information stored, I can click on Select Existing Spreadsheet, and then I can go to that specific spreadsheet and I can see my responses. In this case, I want to create a new spreadsheet and I say Create. So instantly I get this Sheets open with all the relevant information given here in a neat table. So this is the question for which the responses are shown. What is the time the various questions are given responses to? What are the designations? And everything is very neatly organized. So if I want to drill down on this information, I can do so and get my insights. Now let us go back, and here I want to go to the next option here called Settings. In Settings, the first one is make this a quiz. We will do this a little bit later. Now I'm going to leave this option for now. Let us go to the remaining ones. The second one is Responses. Manage how responses are collected and protected. I can click on the drop-down menu. Collect email address. By default, do not collect is the option given. If I want the email address to be collected, I can click on the drop-down menu and say Verified. Now, what does verified mean? The person necessarily has to log into a Google account, and only then the person can respond to survey. The other option is responder input. I give a space where people can write their email ID. So that is what is the responder input option. Here you can see respondents will manually enter their email response. The next option is send responders a copy of their response. Sometimes it is required that people need to have a record of what they have responded. There is always an option available. The default option is off. If you want to provide a copy of the response, then you can choose whether you want to give that only when requested or you want to give them always. So you can choose one of these options. The next option is allow response editing. That is, responses can be changed after being submitted. If you want it toggled on, you can just click here, or if you don't want it, you can say toggle off. The next one is limit to 1 response. This is what I talked about earlier. Now, if you remember, in my case, I didn't have any limitation to the number of responses. But if I want the response to be limited to just 1 person, then I can toggle this on. When I do that, you know that the person first needs to sign in. And once the person signs in, then they can only answer 1 time. Now let us go further. The next option is presentation. Manage how the form and responses are presented. When I click on the drop-down menu, you can see that there is this option here called Show Progress Bar. I can click on. So as I answer my questions, there will be a progress bar that tells me how many questions have been answered and how many more questions are remaining. We will do this when we create a quiz a little later. So I'm going to turn this off for now. And there is this other option called Shuffle Question Order. This again is relevant only for a quiz, because for the regular survey, it doesn't really matter which order in which the questions are answered. The next one is after submission, what happens? The first one is confirmation message. Do you want to send a confirmation message to people as soon as they finish submitting their form? If you want that, then this is the default message. Your response has been recorded. If you want to have a different message, you can always click on edit and you can write your confirmation message. The next one is show link to submit another response. Since we have limited our response to just one person, you can see that there is no option for us to have this on. It says disabled by limit to one response. If you want this to be turned on, naturally you need to go here and toggle it off. As soon as I do that, you can see that I have the option show link to submit another response, which is allowed. The next one is view results summary. Sometimes you may choose to share the results of your survey right after they submit their form. If you want that to happen, then you can toggle this on. The next option is restrictions. If you want to disable autosave for all respondents, you can click this on. Otherwise, you can leave this off. The last set is the defaults. You have form defaults and you have question defaults. In form defaults, you can change the settings applied to this form and new forms by clicking on the drop-down menu. If you want it in such a way that anytime you create any survey in the future, you want your respondents to have signed in before they can answer your survey, then you can change this to verified. So now every time you don't have to remember to change the options in the settings. This will be universally applied for all the surveys that you would create from this time forward. The same is the case with question defaults. If I want the setting to be in such a way that make questions required by default for all questions, I can turn this on. So anytime I introduce any question in any survey, it will be a required question, that is a compulsory question. If you want that to happen, you can have this on. So those are the defaults for all the forms from this point forward. So far, we have seen how to write questions for our survey, how to analyze the responses, and if you want to change the settings of the questions or responses, we have seen how to do that in this tab. Now, let me click on this 3-dot hamburger menu and see what are the other options I have. If I want to make a copy of this survey form, I can do that by clicking on this. If I want to delete this form, I can go to move to trash. There is this option here called pre-fill form. I will talk about this a little later because this is an advanced topic. The next one is embed HTML. When I click on embed HTML option, I get this code. I can stick this to any place where I can stick a HTML code, be it a website or any other place. Let me cancel this. The other option available here is print. If I want to print this form, I can do that. You can also save it as a PDF by going to this print option. The next one is apps script. You can automate the form via apps script using script editor. The next one is get add-ons. What is an add-on? An add-on is a mini program or a utility that extends the functionalities of this base Google form. Let me go to get add-ons and see what we have got. I get taken to this option here called Google Workspace Marketplace. Here I can write Google Forms and hit enter, and you will see a whole bunch of add-ons available for me to download from. Let us say I like this particular add-on. I can install it, and once I install it, I get access to that here in the add-ons option. When I click on it, for now you can see that I only have this one called as GPT for Google Forms, Quiz Builder or ChatGPT. If I had installed other add-ons, then I would see all of those options available here. Usually these add-ons are chargeable because they are developed by individual programmers and naturally they need to be compensated for that. There are some free add-ons available which are developed by Google themselves. Of course, you can click on the get add-ons option and see the free options, and you can of course always download or install those add-ons and you can access them by clicking on this option here. The next option we have is this one called as keyboard shortcuts. You can see that in one place you have all the shortcuts for Google Forms listed down. And these shortcuts are nicely classified based on their various purposes. So if you want to be really fast in working with Google Forms, then you can remember or memorize these shortcuts. So those are the different options I want to share with you in terms of creating a survey and understanding the responses. Now we want to go to the next section of this video, which is about creating a short 5-question quiz. Because creating a quiz is a very important functionality of Google Forms, and this tool really excels in that. So let me show you how that is done. Here I created a new form. Let me change the name. Let us say this is a quiz, and I've given a description. This is a simple quiz to check your familiarity with Google Apps. And I've added 3 multiple choice questions. You know how it is done. It's very easy. Now I want to add one more question. So let us add a new question here. And this time I want to add a question based on an image. So let us go to this option here called Add Inline Image. I can click on that option. I can get the image either from my computer by going to browse or drag a file here option. So if I have an image, I can drag it over here and I can use that as part of the question. Or I can get it from webcam, or I can search by URL. If I already have the image in my Google Photos, I can access that by using that option. If I have the image in Google Drive, I can use this tab to get that. And if I want to go to Google Images and search for a specific image, I can do so. So I'm going to search for the icon for Google Forms. So I've gone to Google Images and say icon for Google Forms and hit enter. And there are quite a few options available here. I'm going to choose the first one and say insert. Now let us see what happens. So here I have the Google Forms icon. I can select this. Since this is way too big, I can hold the shift button down as I click and drag from the corner to resize it. And let us resize it even more so it is compact. The question here is, which Google app does this icon represent? So that is going to be my question. And if I want to center this, I can click on this three-dot menu and I can say center align. So this looks a lot neater. And I have my multiple choice options. So I can click on this being for docs, the next one is for forms, and next one is for sheets, and the next one is for slides. And then that question is done. I want to add one more question. This time I want to add a YouTube video to ask questions from. So let me add a new question. This time, let me choose the option from here called Add Video. As I click on it, you can see that I get this option to select a certain video based on the URL that I already have. Let us say I have a certain video that I have in mind. I can go to that video, copy that URL, paste that URL, and then insert the video. Or I can search for a YouTube video from here. So let us say PowerPoint for beginners and hit enter. And there are some options available here. The one that I want to choose is this. I can select that and say insert. And you can see that the question is above my video. I want this to be moved down. Whenever you want to move a question, you can use this option here with 6 dots. That is the handle. You click and then move it to the location you want. So you can see that I want it right below the previous one and I could do that. So that is exactly the same thing for anything else. For example, I want to move this down, I can do so. And if I want these questions to be brought up, I can do so right up like that. So it is completely up to me how I want the order to be. So let us go back to that video again. And this time I'm going to have a question type that we have not explored so far. Let me go here and ask the question, which is, how would you rate the video? And then I go to multiple choice. And this time I'm going to choose the option called rating. It is a new option available in Google Forms now. I can click on it. And I have these 5 stars available. I can choose whichever for the rating. Of course, you will choose 5, I hope. So that is the option here. Now, instead of these 5 stars, if I want to have some other icon, I can click on the options here. I can check this. So I have 5 options for hearts or 5 likes. So I can choose whichever I want. So if you ask me what the difference is between the linear scale and rating, the difference is in linear scale, you have a numerical scale to do the rating or the grading. Whereas in rating, you have these icons. So that is the difference. So I'm going to leave it at that. Now I've completed my questions. Now I have an option to import questions from another Google form. Let me show you how it is done. Let me go to the option here, the second one called as import questions. I can click and I can select a specific form that I want to take from. So let us say this Google Apps training that we just created. I can go to insert and here you can see that we have these various questions. I want to take the question from say employee ID. So I'm going to select that and import the question. You can see that I have that question imported from that quiz to this one or that survey to this one. Now I can move this as the first option and there we go. So a person has to enter the employee ID before they can answer the various questions in this quiz. Now, if at any point of time, I want to add title and description as one of the blocks in the middle, I can do so. So I can click on add title and description. And here I say, give your details. I'm not really going to add my description here. And of course, as I said earlier, I can make it bold and I can do all kinds of formatting, and I'm going to move this up. So not only does it have some kind of a title and description here, there is also some additional information available here, and then the person starts making the quiz from here. Just wanted to show you the various options available here, because we have seen that this is for adding a new question, importing question, adding title and description, adding an image, and adding a video, and this is to add a section. So those are the various tools available here. So we pretty much covered every single tool that is available here in the Google Form page, and we have not seen these two. One is undo button, the other one is redo button. Just the same shortcuts that you use for the regular undo and redo work for here as well. So you can use those shortcuts in case you don't want to use these icons here. Now, when I publish this, let us see how this quiz is. Right away, you can see that there is this option here called record this email ID as the email to be included with my response. The reason is, we have said that this quiz needs to be taken by verified users only. So that is the reason why this is shown here, and this is a required one. You can see that it indicates required question. That particular red star indicates that. And I'm going to say yes and give your details. So that is some title and description we just added, and employee ID I can give, and I can submit my response. So all that remains the same, and you can see that this is a published one. And if I want to share this, I can go to copy responder link and I can say copy. So this link can be shared either by way of email or by WhatsApp or any other method that you want. And if you had said that anyone with a link can respond to the survey or quiz, then by sharing this link to the person who has received that link can take part in the survey or answer the quiz. Now, it is not necessary to have such a long link to be shared. If you want to share it in a shorter space, then you can go to shorten URL, and you can see that that long link is now shortened into something more manageable. Especially if you want to share it in WhatsApp, this might be a good idea for you to share the link. Let us close this preview mode and say leave. Now there is one last but very interesting and important trick that I want to share with you when it comes to Google Forms. Not many people talk about that in their videos, so that information is going to be quite useful, slightly advanced but very handy. Now, before I share that with you, I want to share this resource that we have with us in presentationprocess.com. It is PowerPoint Templates, which is a teacher's interactive bundle. This bundle has 140 PowerPoint templates for teachers, 25 interactive tabs, and 220 interactive quiz templates pack. So all these are available in this teacher's interactive bundle. Very useful for a teacher or an educator. So if you want a link to this product, it will be in the description box below the video. Click on the link, check out more details about this product. You will really find value in it. Now let us come back to the Google Forms training that we are talking about. The trick that I want to talk about is this one last thing we have not covered so far, and that is pre-fill form option. Now, what is a pre-fill form? Sometimes you may want to pre-fill some of the fields that you've got in your survey form so that you can save some time for your respondents. Or if there is some information that they need to input where there is a possibility of error in input, you can avoid that by pre-populating those fields yourself, so the error is avoided. So there are a number of uses for pre-filling a form. Whatever information that you've already got of the respondent, you can include that as part of the pre-filled option. You only can leave the portions that they need to respond to. So this dramatically reduces the number of things that they need to answer, and it also makes your form very user-friendly. So let us see how that is done. It requires a little bit of understanding of formulas. Don't really get scared, because what I'm going to teach you is very easy to implement even if you are reasonably familiar with Google Sheets. So let us see how it is done. Let me close this option. Let me show you what we need to do step by step. Now, the first thing you do is to go to this option here called More, which is the 3 dots menu in the Google Forms homepage. You go to Pre-fill Form, you get this page. This is like the form that a respondent would see. You can see that you can fill all the details. I'm going to do one simple thing. I go to Employee ID and I'm going to give this dummy response. I'm going to say Employee ID in all caps. So this is what I had written. I want to have that pre-populated with some database that I already have in Google Sheets. So that is what I have done. So I went to the form, went to pre-fill form option, and I gave this dummy value here. And then I'm going to choose this option called Get Link, When I click on that, I get this other option called copy link. I have copied that link. Now that link is in the clipboard of my computer. Now I'm going to open Google Sheets page. Now, how do I do that? I can always go to Google's Sheets page by going here and clicking on this Forms icon. When I do that, I get this other hamburger menu. I can click on that and I can go to Sheets. So let me go to Sheets and I'm going to start a new sheet. Now here I'm going to paste the link that I had copied. If you remember, I went to Get Link, copy link that is there in the clipboard. Now I'm going to paste it here in the corner. You can paste it anywhere as long as you are able to reference this sheet. So I have copied it onto the first cell, A1 cell. Now I'm going to add a new sheet and I'm going to create a database for myself. I'm going to say name and let us have say 3 people, Abe, Bob and Sia. So those are the 3 people and the employee ID for these people will be like say EMP01, EMP02 and this one is EMP03. So that is the code, that is the employee ID for these people. Now I'm going to add a new column. I'm going to call this pre-filled form and here I'm going to hyperlink a certain text to the pre-filled form link that we have already got in our clipboard. So let us go here and use the shortcut called Ctrl-K. As soon as I did that, you can see that I have these 2 options. First one is the text that I want hyperlinked to. So I'm going to give this some name. Maybe test is the name I want to give. And this is the place where you're going to paste the link since I already have that copied. If you remember, I went to pre-filled form, get link, a copy link. So that is already there in the clipboard. So I'm going to paste that by using Ctrl-V option and I'm going to say apply. Now you can see that there is this test. And when I click on that, you can see that I have this option to go to the pre-filled form and this is the pre-filled form. And if you see in this, right now the text that is written here is employee ID because that is what we had filled in at that time. I'm going to replace this with the employee ID that I have got in my Google Sheets. So let me close this. How do I do the cell reference for this? Let us add a new column called as the new form. And here in this cell, I'm going to add a formula. What is the formula? It is substitute formula. Let's say equals substitute. And as I typed, you can see that the suggestion is there. I can click on this. The first thing I need to feed in here is where do you want to look? Then what do you want to look? And what do you want it replaced with? So those are the 3 pieces of information that is required for this formula. So the first one is where do you want it to be? I'm going to say that it is in the sheet 1. If you remember sheet 1, A1 is where it is already there. So I'm going to say sheet 1. So because this is the sheet 1 and I'm going to say exclamation mark. And what is the reference? $A$1 because that is the reference A1 cell, comma. So what do you need to look for? It is employee ID. If you remember, I want to replace employee ID text with the employee ID that I have here. So I'm going to get in the quotes employee ID in capital letters. That is how it is referred to there, comma. So what does it need to be replaced with? This one, which is the cell here. It is B2. So it needs to be replaced by B2 cell. So I'm going to say B2, close bracket and hit enter. Now we have got this suggestion for autofill. So I can say yes. So you can see that the same kind of formula is applied for the remaining other employees as well, Bob and Sia. And now this particular form will now have the employee IDs. Let us check it. Let me go to the first one and click and it takes me to this. You can see that employee ID is EMP01. And if I go to the one for Bob, I can click and you can see it is employee 02. So this has pre-populated employee ID instead of them having to write their employee ID in the given short answer space. This reduces the error and also saves them time. If you liked this Google Forms masterclass, then you will really like this other tutorial that we have put together for you called PowerPoint for Beginners. This is an extremely popular video already, which has more than 4.8 million views so far. You can go to that video and learn all about the basics of PowerPoint. I will leave a link to that right now on your screen. You can click on the link and watch that video next. I'll see you inside that video.